Black Rider, you've been living too hard. You've been up all night, having to stay on your guard. The path that you're walking is too narrow to walk. Every step of the way, another stumbling block. The road that you're on, same road that you know, but it's not the same as it was a minute ago. Welcome to Songs of Experience, a Bob Dylan podcast where we explore the man and the music one song at a time. I'm your host, Henry Bernstein, and this month we are celebrating 1 year of Songs of Experience on Bob Dylan's 84th birthday. Happy birthday, Bob. Happy birthday, Songs of Experience. Thank you, everyone, for coming along this journey with us. In celebration, we're going to do things a little differently this episode. We're going all the way back a year to our first and fifth episodes and talk to Michael Glover Smith, who was on our episode about Tempest, and Adam Selzer, who talked about Lenny Bruce, about a song off of Dylan's 2020 album, Rough and Rowdy Ways. Now, this one might surprise you a little bit. We're talking about Black Rider. Why Black Rider? Well, there's nothing particularly anniversary-esque about it, but I've seen this song performed many times, specifically with the two guys who we'll be talking to today. And it's kind of lived rent-free in my head the last 5 years, and certainly especially the last year as I've seen it a few times on the road. So after I share some stats, as I usually do, we'll go to my conversation first with Michael about his take on Black Rider. He's mostly going to focus on the music. And then we'll talk to Adam Selzer, who will mostly talk about his sort of specific take on what the Black Rider could be about and what this mysterious song is all about. At the end, we'll come back together for a little roundtable discussion. I'll share my take on Black Rider. So Black Rider, of course, is from the album Rough and Rowdy Ways, which was recorded between January and February in 2020, released on June 19th. 2020. It was recorded in Sound City, Los Angeles. The personnel on this album are Bob Dylan on vocals, guitar, and harmonica, Charlie Sexton, Bob Britt on guitar, Donnie Herron, steel guitar, violin, accordion, mandolin, Tony Garnier on bass, Matt Chamberlain drums, some additional musicians, Blake Mills, Bent Montench, Alan Pasqua, Fiona Apple, engineers were Chris Shaw, Joseph Lorge, and Greg Calibri. I'm not going to go into too much more on this because we're going to talk about those musicians with Michael in a moment. Let's go to my conversation with Michael.
Thank you, Michael, for coming back to Songs of Experience headquarters. We're 1 year later. We were sitting over there a year ago talking about Tempest, and here we are at the 1 year anniversary of this podcast. I started with you, so I had to kind of come full circle a year later, and we're talking about Black Rider. I don't know that that's like a particularly anniversary-esque type song, but it's funny. It's sort of been on my mind for 5 years, living rent-free. Clearly it's been on yours, it's been on Adam's, so we'll talk to you later. And we've seen it so many times, and so I just wanted to get your thoughts on Black Rider.
Well, first of all, we should be talking about ISIS because today is the 5th day of May.
That's true. We're recording on the 5th day of May. Yeah.
But first of all, thank you for having me back. I had such a blast last time, and I want to be the Bob Dylan birthday guest every year going forward.
Consider it done.
Yeah. No, I'm really happy that you asked me to talk about this song because I like talking about the recent songs the most. It was a blast talking about Tempest, and Black Rider is a song that has fascinated me ever since I first heard Rough and Rowdy Ways, back in 2020. So
remember 2020?
Exactly. Yeah, 5 years ago, but it feels more like 10 years ago. But I think the recent work is more exciting because there's not as much criticism devoted to it. Like the 60s songs, there's just a mountain of commentary out there.
All right here.
Yeah, and there's nothing you can say that hasn't been said. Or if you are going to say something new, you're going to be like staking out a position in opposition to
something.
Right? But whereas Black Rider, we can say things that have never been said before.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to, yeah.
Like we did for Tempest.
Right. Right, that's right. Yeah, it's funny. I don't even know that it's necessarily a standout on the album, like the most memorable song of the album, but that's only because all of the songs on Rough and Rowdy Ways are memorable in their own way. I mean, it's just an absolute masterpiece. And he's saying something about Black Rider. And I think, we may have some different ideas of what he's saying, and that's why you're here. But he's definitely saying something.
Yeah. Well, Black Rider, I'm glad you brought up that it may not be one of the the very best songs on the album because it's not, in my opinion, in the top tier of songs on that album. I mean, for me, there are four songs that I consider the big four,
Let's hear it.
and those are Murder Most Foul, Key West, I've Made Up My Mind to Give Myself to You, and Mother of Muses.
Wow.
Those have always been my favorite four. I know a lot of people would not put Mother of Muses in that category.
Right.
I will fight them to the death.
All right. Next year we'll talk about May 24th and 2026.
But that's, my top tier. And I would put Black Rider in the second tier along with My Own Version of You and I Contain Multitudes. And then I would put the three blues songs in the bottom tier.
Really? Rubicon, False Prophet, and Jimmy Reed.
Yeah, which and honestly, I think those are great songs, but they're the most somehow familiar or predictable
because
in
it's
a way.
blues. It's Bob Dylan playing the blues.
Yeah, there's going to be 2 or 3 blues songs on every Dylan album, and I think the non-blues songs on Rough and Rowdy are all surprising in a way. They feel like Murder Most Foul. And even Black Rider, I mean, it just feels kind of like uncharted territory for him.
Oh, yeah.
Musically and lyrically.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like nothing we had heard before.
Exactly.
Or since. Obviously, there hasn't been much since. But I think on the album, it is both it's sort of sonically and tonally sparse and just sort of dissonant feeling of it. It kind of gives you the chills. Like, what are we doing here? What's Bob doing here?
Yeah, it is the sparsest arrangement of any song on the album. It's also the quietest song. And did you know, Henry, that it is the least popular song on the album?
Lay it on me.
Judging by streams.
Okay, interesting.
So on YouTube.
That's what everyone skip?
Yes.
Where you and I would say no skips on Rough Rowdy Ways, that's the skip.
Yeah, it is on Dylan, on his official YouTube channel, he uploaded all 10 of the songs. Most of them have been streamed over 1 million times. Murder Most Foul is 5 million plus, but most of the rest of them are 1 million plus. Of the few that are under 1 million, they're still above 600,000, and Black Rider is less than 400,000.
Wow.
So it's by a considerable margin the least listened to song,
an acquired taste,
according to YouTube. And I'm assuming that would be the same for Spotify and all the other services. Yeah. So my theory is all the people who are sampling the songs on the album, they don't get far into that one before they decide they're ready for the next track. They don't get to the 30-second mark to where it counts as a listen.
Right.
And I think what you just said is the reason why, because it's so quiet, it's so sparse. Dylan is kind of singing the words. And I think people just think, oh, this isn't exciting. Let's go to the next one.
They don't even stick around for the best line.
In spite of the line.
Yeah.
But, having said all that, I think it's a substantial song. I think it's a fascinating song. And I think it's a great song. When I say it's the second tier, meaning 5th, 6th, 7th best song on the album, that still, in my opinion, means it's a great song. But what I really want to talk about today is my theory about how Bob Dylan wrote the music for this song.
Right. So as sparse and dissonant as the music is, there is music, there is a melody, there are people playing on it, and Bob Dylan wrote it.
And there is a method to his madness.
Yes.
And so I want to just preface what I'm about to say. I say this is a theory. So this is pure speculation.
Right, of course, of course. Well, because that's what we do best here.
Right. I mean, nobody knows how Bob Dylan writes songs in recent decades. Right. It's because the secrecy around that whole process has increased over time. But, the musicians who play with him, the engineers in the studio, they've given interviews. There's little breadcrumbs here and there. So what I want to do tonight is I want you to think of me as a lawyer,
Okay.
and I'm going to argue my case.
Great. Am I the judge pounding his gavel?
You're the
Am I
judge.
the jury? What?
You're the judge, the jury, and the
Oh,
executioner.
okay. Oh.
And so when I'm
Am I the
done,
Black Rider?
exactly.
Or are you the Black Rider?
Just don't cut off my arm.
Okay.
But when I'm done, I want you. I'm gonna try and show you the evidence, and then I want you to tell me what your verdict is,
Okay.
what you think.
All right.
And I have a bunch of notes
In your Rough and Rowdy Ways notebook.
in my Rough and Rowdy Ways notebook. So I want to first talk about the fact that when Bob Dylan played this song for the first time at the first show last year in 2024 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, he said something very unusual when the performance was over. Do you remember what that was?
I don't.
Okay.
Were you there at that
I was not. No, I was at Orlando. So I
yeah.
was there like a week or two later.
Okay.
But after the first show, he says into the microphone to the audience, Blake Mills wrote that melody.
Oh, yeah.
Remember?
That's right.
And that kind of raised some eyebrows because Bob Dylan is the only credited songwriter on Rough and Rowdy Ways.
Right.
But people had speculated for a while that Blake Mills's involvement may have been greater than his credit as an additional musician. A lot of people speculate that he deserves some kind of producer credit on the album because that's his studio. Some people speculate maybe he had a hand in arranging the songs.
Right.
And some people even said he possibly wrote the music for some of these songs.
Right. And Blake Mills, of course, is no stranger to Bob Dylan music, as we talked about with Aaron Callahan on the False Prophet episode. He, on his Instagram, dumped a whole bunch of him, like demonstrations of him playing the licks specifically from False Prophet.
Right.
And then he did, I think, even maybe Multitudes and a couple other things. Maybe even Black Rider. I don't remember.
I think he did 7 songs.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a good portion of the album, and then they all got removed. You can find them on Daily Motion, and if you go back into our False Prophet episode, you can hear some of them and see a little bit of them. But that also is sort of mysterious, like the sort of disappearance of Blake Mills there. And of course, on that great Chimes of Freedom compilation of covers, he and Danielle Chaim from Chaim,
Yes.
my Jewish sisters, my Hebrew name is Chaim, so I love them, did a Heart of Mine, which is
great.
It's a great version of Heart of Mine. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Blake Mills, as long as you're mentioning him, that his sort of coming in and out of Rough and Rowdy Ways is rather mysterious. So that's interesting that Bob would credit him that way. It's not like he said, well, he never played Rollin' and well, he did play Rollin' and Tumblin' live, but he never said that's a Muddy Waters song.
Right. But we all know.
Right.
We all know it's a Muddy Waters song, but we don't know what Blake Mills did. So the question is, how is it possible that Blake Mills doesn't receive a credit if Dylan himself said Blake Mills wrote that melody?
Interesting.
Wow. Well, Blake Mills did post something about it on his Instagram stories because our buddy Michael from Germany, False Prophet, tagged Blake Mills and posted, I think, an audio clip of Dylan saying that. And I want to read you Blake Mills's verbatim response because this is fascinating. And I've seen the screenshot. Blake Mills wrote, "To the best of my recollection, this is Bob's melody, comma, my chords. Completely astonished and amazed that he said this, though." And then Blake Mills wrote 2 little heart emojis and a rainbow.
Oh my God. So before anyone gets, shakes their tiny fist in the air and angry, wringing their hands at Bob for not crediting anyone, Blake Mills is okay.
Oh yeah.
He's thrilled.
Yeah. I mean, I think Blake Mills has always talked about the experience of working on this album in really laudatory terms.
Right.
Like, it was a great experience for him.
Right. Interesting, though, that is a very specific separation there.
Yeah.
His melody, my chords. I mean, I think you could easily be flipped the other way. Blake Mills is like an accomplished producer and composer. one would think Bob Dylan, the master of three chords, would have maybe come up with the chords and Blake would have come up with the melody. So that's just an interesting thing to note. I mean, what do you make of
Right,
that?
right. Well, it's interesting that Dylan said Blake wrote that melody, and then Blake's recollection is Bob wrote the melody, my chords.
Yeah.
But I think when people talk about melody, they oftentimes mean different things.
Mm.
Because in popular music, and you know this because you're a musician,
Mhm.
when people talk about the melody, what they mostly mean is the vocal melody,
Mhm.
right? Because in pop music, there aren't a whole lot of chords. And when you play certain chords in a certain order, you're actually playing a bunch of songs.
Right.
Like a Rolling Stone is
Right.
the same as La Bamba
Right.
or Hang On Sloopy
Right.
or Stand by REM. It's
Right.
like,
I mean, Ed Sheeran appeared in court demonstrating this, that
yeah,
like literally there's only so many chords that, they're sort of like the axis of awesome, the C, A minor, F, G thing. Like
yes.
every single rock song
Yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
that. Like there are only so many chords,
Right. Or Knocking on Heaven's Door,
Yes.
GDC. I mean, how many songs are those three chords?
Yeah, that's so funny that you mentioned Knocking on Heaven's Door because I was just listening to the recently updated Snack concert from Bob. Maybe we were in the car together listening. No, no, I was
No,
with
no.
Adam. But
Helpless.
he he does Helpless and then Knocking on Heaven's Door. Like that's the same
It's the
song. And
same
they
song.
actually, Neil Young and Bob Dylan played them back to back, like the chutzpah of them to actually play the same song.
Because they knew it was
Right.
the same song.
Yeah, and they're like, there's only so many chords.
Right, right. So, personally, I think if Blake Mills wrote either the melody or the chords, it would be unethical of Bob Dylan to not credit him as a co-writer on the song. But I read something on the Expecting Rain message board. Shout out to all the ER members who
Yes.
might be listening.
Carl Eric, our friend.
Yes, that I am convinced has led me to the story of how Dylan wrote this song, and I think I know why Blake Mills is not credited
Okay.
as a writer. So, what if Bob Dylan played a piece of classical music in the studio as a template for what he wanted his musicians to do? And what if it was Blake Mills's job to translate that piece of music into guitar chords? If that's what happened, then you could say, well, Blake Mills didn't really write the music. He was transposing something to the guitar. And if Blake was playing the guitar for the first time, playing those chords, and then Dylan started singing over it and came up with that melody, then I think it would be ethical for Dylan to not have to credit him. So before I tell you what I think the template is for Black Rider, I want to explain that it is very well known that Dylan uses pre-existing songs as templates for a lot of his own original songs.
As is the folk tradition.
As is the folk tradition.
Yeah.
But specifically, when he was recording Together Through Life in 2009, David Bianco, who is the engineer on that album, actually gave an interview and said the first thing Dylan said when he showed up in the studio is, we're going to listen to the templates first. And David Bianco said, oh, is this a covers album? And Dylan goes, no, they're not covers, they're templates. And then, they would listen to a song and then they would play it. And then Dylan would start singing his own original lyrics. I mean, the most obvious example would be My Wife's Hometown, which is based on Willie Dixon's song, I Just Want to Make Love to You. Have you heard the Willie Dixon song?
Yeah.
I mean, it's identical.
It's the same song.
And Willie Dixon is credited as a co-writer of that song on Together Through Life.
So it's Bob Dylan, Robert Hunter, and Willie Dixon?
All three of them are credited.
Wow. Is that the only track on that album where there's more than two
Correct.
credits? Wow.
Yes. And a lot of people, a lot of cynical people say, oh, well, that's because Willie Dixon's estate is notoriously litigious.
Even so, I mean,
Yeah, they'll sue your ass.
good call, Bob.
So, but our buddy Matthew Inget,
hmm
Together Through Life,
hmm Somewhere
uh,
around here. Yeah.
somewhere up there. He was recently in the Bob Dylan archive doing research. Something he just posted online is that he looked at the Dylan's lyrics for Life is Hard, which is the first song Dylan wrote for that album. And at the very top of the lyric sheet, Dylan wrote, template, you don't know me.
Oh.
So Dylan literally wrote the name of the song that was the template. You Don't Know Me is classic Ray Charles song
Yeah.
that was written by somebody else. I don't know who, but Dylan has played You Don't Know Me, I think like a dozen times in concert. Now, when you listen to Life is Hard, the melody is actually totally different. I mean, I would have never known that was the template because what Dylan often does is I think he starts off singing new words and then eventually he starts to change the melody as well. And oftentimes the melody will stray to the point where you don't even know what the template was. And I think that's what happened with Life is Hard. But if you know that You Don't Know Me as the template, you can sing the lyrics of Life is Hard because it has the same meter. So you can sing the lyrics to Life is Hard to the tune of You Don't Know Me and vice versa.
Wow.
So that's cool.
Well, I just wanted to touch on something that you said about classical music that is just has stuck in my head for years. In regards to your beloved Triplicate and Fallen Angels and Shadows in the Night, I have this memory, and maybe I'm misremembering it, and you with your photographic memory will know what I'm talking about, that Bob Dylan said something about those albums. Maybe he gave an interview, but he said that he wanted the band to recreate what those amazing orchestras in Studio A or whatever were doing, like, but just with the five of them or whatever, maybe a couple more, a couple less. Am I remembering that correctly?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that would support what you're saying, that Bob Dylan using classical music as a template and as a base for having his band construct something else is consistent, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you say that because I hadn't even thought of that, but you're right. You know, Dylan talked about when he did those Great American Songbook albums that what he was doing was uncovering the songs because he goes, they've been covered enough, they've been buried.
Yeah.
So he said, I'm digging them out of the grave and bringing them to the light of day. And you know,
and it was quite impressive, like seeing him live. It felt like a whole orchestra. Like it felt no different than listening to, Sinatra with an orchestra. It was but it was only five musicians doing it. It was
playing very sparsely.
Yeah.
I mean, oftentimes it was just like Donnie Haran on the pedal steel that was standing in for the orchestra. And so, yeah, I think he kind of did something similar with Rough and Rowdy Ways. I'm going to tell you what the song is that I think is the template, and I hope you'll be able to play it on this podcast because it is in the public domain.
Great, then we
will do that. Hopefully you'll be able to find a recording that's in the public domain. And I have to also give a shout out. See, I'm citing my sources, unlike Bob Dylan. I also have to give a shout out to Expecting Rain discussion board member, My Echo, My Shadow, and Me, who pointed out, he said, well, if Dylan said that Blake Mills wrote the melody of Black Rider, he was pulling Blake Mills's leg because the melody comes from The Cold Song by Henry Purcell. Which was written in the year 1691.
Oh my God.
So Henry Purcell was a Baroque English composer, and he died young. I think he was 36 years old when he died, and about 4 years before he died, he composed an opera titled King Arthur, and the Cold Song is one of the songs in this opera. And I listened to it, and it is very close to Black Rider.
Wow.
It's faster, but
Okay.
Black Rider sounds like a slowed down version of this same song. Now, I want to give you two pieces of evidence that support my theory that this is what happened. I think Dylan, much like he did with Together Through Life, went into the studio and said, okay, we're going to listen to the templates. And I think he played the Cold song. And here's why. We know he did that with another song on Rough and Rowdy Ways. I've made up my mind to give myself to you. Not only is it's based on a song from an opera, it's Jacques Offenbach's The Tales of Hoffmann, which is from the 19th century. That's where that melody comes from. And everybody knew that as soon as it came out. Like they heard it and they said, oh, this is based on a 19th century opera.
Okay.
So the fact that he already did that with another song, I think lends some credence to this theory. And the second piece of evidence that I have, and I think this is even more compelling, is the Cold song also served as the template for another song that someone composed for a movie soundtrack in the 1980s.
Oh,
Have you seen the film Scarface by Brian De Palma?
of course. Yeah.
The Cold song is also the template for Tony's theme.
Really?
From Scarface, and that score was composed by Giorgio Moroder. It is nearly identical. And
Scarface is, of course, mentioned.
Scarface is
on Rough and
referenced
Rowdy Ways.
elsewhere on Rough and Rowdy Ways on the song My Own Version of You.
Right.
I'll take the Scarface Pacino, the Godfather
Brando,
Brando, mix them up in a tank and get a robot commando.
Wow.
So that's my theory.
I need to lie down.
Oh my God.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So Black Rider itself is a robot commando.
Right. He mixed them all up. I mean that which is again consistent with Bob Dylan, what he does. He takes a little bit from, Stephen Foster, a little bit from this blues song.
Right.
And I mean that's,
puts them in a pot.
right.
Stirs
them up. Wow, that's amazing. All right. Well, this song has been played about 250 times. All of the Rough and Rowdy Ways songs, short of Crossing the Rubicon and Murder Most Foul, which has never been played, have been performed that many times. Crossing the Rubicon, of course, only
21 fewer.
21
He didn't play it at all.
In 2021. He didn't play it. Okay. So anyway, you and I have seen Black Rider probably 25 times combined, maybe more. You saw it. You have seen it every year since 2021, right?
Correct.
I've seen it every year since 2021, with the exception of 2022. Many of those we overlapped at.
Yeah.
Has your experience seeing it live informed this theory? Has it supported your theory? What do you feel about it when you experience it live?
I think it's what it's done. It's caused my appreciation for the song to grow, because I think it's always a highlight of the Rough and Rowdy shows. I mean, the Rough and Rowdy shows are, I think, kind of spooky, and that song always delivers. The arrangement has gone through some evolutions. Early on, it sounded probably the closest that it did to the album version.
Sure. I mean, in 2021, everything that he played
was closer.
Was the album, basically.
And now, of course, it's got prominent drums all the way through, so it kind of swings. But it's got, the great reverb on the vocals, which is an unusual touch.
And he only does it about twice in the song, I think, and not every time.
Right. Yeah. You never know how prominent the reverb is going to be, but I can't recall him adding reverb like that to any other song except for Not Dark Yet in 2019. Yes.
It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. version.
incredible arrangement, that
Yeah.
incredible arrangement. And so, but Black Rider kind of calls out for it because it already was a spooky song.
Yeah.
But I think he's found more, color and more textures within the song
Hmm.
live. The first time I heard it on the album, it reminded me of Leonard Cohen
Hmm.
because I think a lot of Leonard Cohen's later work has kind of sparse arrangements where he
Hmm.
kind of talks over them. And yet I think Black Rider is a song that's kind of grown musically.
Hmm.
I think he sings it more
Yes.
live.
Well, you were talking about a melody. There is more of a melody
There's more of a
now.
melody and he
Yeah.
draws the words out a lot longer,
Yeah.
especially of course at the end of the lines.
It's sort of, I mean, because it's sort of basically like da 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 da. That's basically what it
Right,
is. It's like the
right.
sort of the skeleton of it, but there is there's more of a build now up to that climax vocally, and then the coming down of whatever that great last line of every verse is.
Right, right.
You said it's a highlight of the Rough Rowdy Ways show. I feel that too, and it was surprising to me. It was sort of like I wouldn't say that going into Rough and Rowdy Ways, I couldn't wait to hear Black Rider.
Right,
I
right.
was excited to hear how the crowd would react to the size of your cock will get you nowhere, and they basically never disappoint. The
Yeah.
crowd loves that. I joke that that's like the new, spirit on the water. You think I'm over the hill, you think I'm past my
Yeah.
prime, and the crowd just loves that. Um,
Audience participation.
right, audience participation, right. And then of course, as we joked, that the Gulf of Mexico line is now the size of your cock line
Yes.
because in terms of crowd participation. But it's sneakily a highlight of the show. I think
Yeah.
every time I'm like, oh, we're at Black Rider now. Okay, all right, let's settle in. And then by the time it's over, I'm just, by the time you've been on the job too long, my jaw is on the floor,
Yeah.
and I just can't believe how good it was. And
It's always great.
if you can hear on some of the live recordings that someone recorded near me. Adam and I, if there's you or something like that was the best Black Rider. Remember?
Yeah.
I don't know where those recordings came from, but you can hear the sort of audible gasps. There's I I think it was Black Rider. It was either Black Rider. I think it was Black Rider where at one point he goes, maybe after one line. Do you remember that? And you and I burst out
Oh,
laughing. It was
yes.
either Black Rider or, my own version of you or something. But he says like I think it was like I I don't know, maybe don't turn on the charm, maybe. I don't know. There was something where he
Yeah.
added a little
He
mind.
did a little
He
aside.
goes, maybe. And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
you and
yeah.
I like burst out laughing. You
Yes.
can hear it on the tape. But I think it was Black Rider. I should have checked that because I was listening to it recently and I was dying. Like that was so funny.
I think you're right. The problem is I just saw 6 shows in a row, so they all
Right.
blend together.
Right. I saw four and they're, all with long drives late at
Yeah.
night. And,
Within a span of a week.
right. Right. It was like that. April 11th to 19th or something.
Yeah.
It was a lot. But it's weird. I feel that with Rough and Rowdy Ways in general, on the one hand, I'm, ready for the next thing. Obviously, I'm very excited for the Outlaw tour. And, when this episode drops, I will be in Ridgefield, Washington, holding up a sign that says Happy Birthday, Bob. But I feel like also I'm gonna miss the Rough and Rowdy Ways tour. And like I sort of I want him to record a new album and do a new tour and keep doing Outlaw and all these things. I also like I feel sort of in a melancholy mood about Rough and Rowdy Ways potentially being over.
Yeah.
Like it was an amazing experience to see it as a complete performance. And Black Rider kind of smack dab in the middle of the set list. I don't
Yeah.
remember which track it is on the set list. Is it six or seven, maybe?
Got to be around
Something
there.
like that. 17 song set list. It kind of is sort of the stake in the ground
Hmm.
and it's sort of like if you don't get what I'm doing yet, this is it. This is what you're experiencing. This
Right.
song is sort of the whole like you said, spookiness of Rough and Rowdy Ways.
And he does that in My Own Version of You back to back, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I think those two kind of work together in a
yeah,
way,
yeah.
and he kind of rearranged My Own Version of You in the opposite direction. He gave that the sparse arrangement.
Yes,
So, Black Rider with the prominent drums,
right.
whereas on the studio album version, there's only five drum beats in that
Is
entire,
that right?
yeah, one at the end of each verse.
Wow.
So it's only after he's done singing the verse, Matt Chamberlain hits a drum one time at the end of each of the five verses.
Mike, you've
You
unpacked
cannot play the drums more sparsely than that.
that, yeah, without not playing them.
Yeah.
So, all right, Mike, you've unpacked this song quite a bit on the album. So what, if you can, what else is happening musically? What other instruments do you recognize? What do you think Bob is playing? What is happening? Is Blake Mills playing at all?
I
Playing guitar
think
at all?
Blake Mills is playing because he
Is he
plays
just strumming
yeah,
chords
he
one by
plays the
one?
nylon string
Hmm.
guitar on the album on a few songs.
Hmm.
Like that
Classical guitar, yeah.
classical guitar
Hmm.
on he definitely plays it on Mother of Muses.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think on My Own Version of You as well.
Hmm.
I think Donnie Herron's on mandolin, and I
Hmm.
think there's another guitar, Tony on upright
Tony has like a
bass.
very low kind of bass thing
Yeah,
happening. Do you think is
and
Bob playing piano
I
or
don't think so.
no?
No, I don't think so. I don't think Bob plays piano on the album at all.
You think it's
Uh,
just Fiona Apple on those
yes.
couple tracks? Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't think he plays piano on the album at all?
I don't think so.
Hmm.
No.
Do you think he plays guitar on the album?
I do.
Hmm.
Well, he's credited with playing guitar on the album. And who's the other piano player? Alan Pasqua
Hmm.
said that Dylan played guitar on Murder Most Foul, which
Which
is
is
interesting.
shocking.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is shocking.
Yeah.
But I think that is correct. There's also a lot of speculation that Dylan played the solo on I've Made Up My Mind to Give Myself to You, the
Mm.
guitar solo,
Mm.
which I think is right in his wheelhouse.
Totally in his wheelhouse. And as we saw in the Rough and Rowdy Ways tour, he can do more with a solo than we expect him to.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
he's once again he has proven he is a very adept guitarist, very skilled guitarist, and despite 60 years of, sorry
yeah.
Terry Thal, he's a good guitarist.
Yeah, you just can't see him when he plays.
Right.
You can hear it.
From the back of his head, he looked like an amazing guitarist. Yeah, but all I need is my ears. It's funny. Like when I saw him in 2019, I only saw him twice that year, because before I met you and Adam, I didn't know it was a thing to go travel around and see him. I just thought you go see him when he comes to your city.
Yeah.
But anyway, don't you dare miss it, as the poster says. But at the UIC Pavilion in Chicago, I sprung for front row tickets. It was the first time I had
Nice.
done that. And there I am on the Donnie Herron side, so on the right side if you're facing the stage. And Bob came out with the first two songs, played on guitar. I'm like, this is awesome. And if you remember on that tour, he was playing an upright piano and he sat down behind it, and I didn't see him the rest of the concert. But I just closed my eyes and let it wash over me, and I had a blast. And so sometimes, I think it's okay that he turns his back to the audience to play guitar. You like to say he wants to be Miles Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Was that a thing? Did Miles Davis do that?
Oh yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well, Bob actually referenced that.
Really?
I think he said it in the interview with Cameron Crowe that he did for Biograph. I
Oh, in
think that's
85.
yeah. I think Dylan said, I tried to play with my back to the audience like Miles Davis, but people didn't get it. They thought I was sick or something.
That's great.
But there's one other thing I want to bring up about Black Rider, which is, have you read that essay about it on the Dylan Chords website?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
I
so
did my homework in preparation for this, as recommended by you.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar with that site, right?
As I've said before on the podcast, that's how I learned how to play guitar.
Right.
I sat on that site and I just went album by album, song by song, and taught myself
Right.
how to play guitar through Bob Dylan.
It's an incredible resource.
It is.
Eyolf Ostrom.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eyolf. The only thing, the only like nitpick I had once. This actually has something to do with Dylan chords. It has to do with expecting rain. I was trying to learn the chords for Together Through Life, and I think I asked like on the message boards, "Hey, I'm wondering when the chords for Together Through Life are going to come off. This is Unexpected Rain. Come up. I would love to learn. I'm looking for like My Wife's Hometown or something, or It's All Good. It wasn't
Yeah.
It's All Good because that's only in G, but it was something like one of the very that album in general is very simple
Yeah,
in
yeah,
terms of guitar. And I was a novice guitar player at the time, and so I
Mhm.
was just asking like an innocent question, and all these people came after me like, "Oh, sorry, mate, you're having such a hard time playing a song with one chord," and like, like everyone. And then, like, I think once even the chords got put up, it was like, I know people have been waiting for this one. Here's the, stunning chords from so it's Together Through Life. So I never again said a word about,
Right,
but
yeah.
yes, those chords are amazing. And that
Uh,
article, yeah, tell us about
And
that
well,
article.
it's a great article.
Yeah.
He actually makes the claim that it's one of Dylan's most complex
Mhm.
songs from a musical point of view,
Mhm.
and he talks about how oftentimes, it sounds right when you hear certain chords in a certain order because it creates an expectation.
Mhm.
So when chords follow a certain pattern, you have an expectation of where musically the song is going to go, and then when it goes there, it's satisfying.
Mhm.
And that Black Rider deliberately disrupts that
Mhm.
because of the way the chords are arranged.
Hmm.
Because there are seventh chords in there, and there's a place where you think it's gonna go somewhere, and then Dylan kind of wrong foots you,
Yeah.
or Henry Purcell wrong foots you.
Right.
And then I think Aoff also makes the claim that that's also reflected in the lyrics of the song because Dylan sings the road that you're on, the only one that you know is not the same one that it was a minute ago.
Mm.
And that's what the song is also doing
Mhm.
musically.
It's interesting because it does there is a resolution both musically and thematically at the end of every verse. It does resolve in a satisfying way, but again, like I said before, it's dissonant and it
Right.
doesn't resolve, like you said, in the way that you're expecting on that,
Yeah.
that doesn't come back to that first chord,
Right.
basically.
Right.
I wanted to ask you one more thing, Mike. So, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about film. Do you find anything about this song in particular cinematic?
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
what is cinematic
Yeah,
about it?
big time. Well, I think we should just dive into the lyrics.
Okay, let's do it a little. Yeah, we should.
I thought I was only going to talk about the music, but
Let's get through some of the lyrics.
I
We don't
think
have
I
to
think
go through all of them, but why don't you give me some highlights of some
yeah.
lyrics that really, and I have them here if you need them. Some lyrics
Well,
that.
I don't have a definitive interpretation of, what this song means.
Okay.
I think this is the kind of song that a lot of people have interpreted in different ways, and I think it's the kind of thing where, they're all right.
Mhm.
They're all right, and no one's right.
Yeah.
It's a mysterious song, but it's basically one person talking about another person. The narrator of the song is addressing someone called the Black Rider. So it's kind of it's not a dialogue, it's like a monologue that's being addressed to someone else.
Mhm.
And I think the most common way that is interpreted is that it's Bob Dylan talking to himself. And I think
He's the Black Rider.
he is the Black Rider, but he's also the narrator. So he's addressing himself.
Very tangled up in blue kind of way of being both all of those things,
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like a Cubist painting.
yeah, yeah.
You're seeing both sides of
Right,
something at the same time.
right.
Um, but I think that also kind of creates a rhyme with my own version of you, because some people say the same thing about my own version of you. They're saying, "Oh, my own version of you is about Robert Zimmerman creating Bob Dylan." Like
Mm.
Robert Zimmerman is Frankenstein and Bob Dylan is Frankenstein's monster, right?
Mhm.
And then Black Rider could be the same way. It's like the narrator is the real Bob Dylan. The narrator is Robert Zimmerman, and Bob Dylan is the Black Rider, is the public persona,
Hmm.
you know. And that's why he says the size of your cock will get you nowhere. He's like cutting him down to size. He's saying you're not that big of a deal.
Interesting.
You're just the same small town boy
From
from
Hibbing,
Hibbing,
Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Wow, wow,
Exactly.
wow, that's great. Is there anything else about Black Rider you want to say? I mean, we'll have a little bit more time with Adam, and we'll talk more about it. But is there, anything now that you have your time right now with Black
Well,
Rider?
I love it. I've listened to Rough and Rowdy Ways so many times over the past 5 years. I still listen to it all the time.
What
Like
are
I've
your
never,
Rough and Rowdy Ways habits? Like, will you listen? I know you listen to music when you go on long walks, and is it like a thing where you'll listen to it and then just start it right over? Do you put it away for a while and then come back to it? Like how does Rough and Rowdy Ways keep coming up
I don't
for you?
listen to it on repeat. But I will listen to it all the way through.
Do you
Sometimes,
listen to individual songs though?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So sometimes I'll listen to it all the way through. Sometimes I'll listen to the first 9 songs and not listen to Murder Most
That was
Foul.
my next question.
And then sometimes I will, I'll listen. I've created a lot of
Hmm.
playlists, and there are playlists I have that have some Rough and Rowdy Way songs, but not
Yeah,
all.
we listened to a great one on the way to Peoria.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just something I listen to all the time, and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's inexhaustible.
Hmm.
It's such a rich text.
Hmm.
There's so much going on in it, musically and lyrically. The other thing that I didn't talk about, but that I could have, because I did heavily edit the Wikipedia page for Black Rider
Hmm.
specifically,
Hmm.
is Scott Warmoth believes that the song is alluding to Robert Wilson's play, The Black Rider,
Mm.
because Dylan references that play in Chronicles in a stealth way.
Hmm.
The Black Rider is, I don't know if you're familiar with the play.
Mm.
I've never seen it, but Tom Waits wrote the score. He
Oh.
wrote the music. And William S. Burroughs wrote the text. He
Hmm.
wrote the libretto. And Scott Warmoth has argued very convincingly that Dylan references that play in Chronicles without ever mentioning the title.
Hmm.
Because, and this is like too much to get into here, but basically, Ernest Hemingway's story, The Snows of Kilimanjaro, Dylan took elements from that and put them into Chronicles.
Mm.
Scott, who is brilliant,
Amazing. Yeah.
he claims that Dylan actually retells the story of the snows of Kilimanjaro in a telescoped way that he reduces it to one paragraph, but kind of retells it in the middle of this chapter in Chronicles. And I believe him,
Yeah.
But the snows of Kilimanjaro is also referenced by Burroughs in the Black Rider libretto. And it all has to do with the concept of selling your soul to the devil. So
Which is sort of an easy, if we want to, like on a very surface level, the Black Rider could be the devil.
exactly.
Yeah, could
Yeah.
be the Angel of Death, could be,
Right.
something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what the Robert Wilson play is about.
Hmm.
It's about a guy who sells his soul to the devil. So
Amazing.
if Dylan is referencing it, he's doing it in a very roundabout way. But that's oftentimes how he operates.
So good.
And I think some Dylan fans don't care. They don't
Yeah.
want to dive that deep. Personally, I do.
Yeah.
Like when I found out when Scott Warmoth was first, making all these revelations about Dylan, referencing Henry Rollins' nonfiction books in his songs,
Hmm.
that made me love those songs even more
Hmm.
because I became so impressed with the process. But I think a lot of Dylan fans, including people who are big fans, they just don't, it's just not interesting to them.
Yeah, and
you
that's
know,
that's fine. I mean,
and that's fine too.
yeah,
But this is the thing that keeps me going back
right.
to this song and I think the recent work over and over again.
Okay, two questions on that. One, do you like a good movie? Like some of our favorite movies, like A Complete Unknown. Do you keep finding new ideas or things when you listen to Black Rider or Rough and Rowdy Ways at large that you hadn't heard or thought of before?
Oh
When you,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Like my discovery of the Henry Purcell thing
Mm,
was fairly recent,
mhm, mm,
so
mhm, mhm,
that was really exciting. That was basically me doing research to
mhm.
appear on this podcast.
Great, we love it.
Yeah.
And then the other question was about Rough and Rowdy Ways at large. I don't think I don't know if we have time to do an exhaustive top 10, top five, whatever, but in sort of we talked a little bit this in the car on one of our road trips, but where do you put Rough and Rowdy Ways overall in the canon, with his other great albums?
Henry, I put it at the very top.
Wow.
I mean, honestly, it's my favorite Bob Dylan album. Yeah,
Breaking news.
because
Wow, that is a hot take. I mean, not a
yeah,
hot take because like I also love it and would put it up there as a tippy top album, but wow, that is it's your favorite or slash the best Bob Dylan album.
well, I had a
Say it, Mike. I want
okay,
you to say
okay. Well, let me tell you a
it.
story.
Okay.
Okay, I do think it's the best Bob Dylan
Okay.
album. But one time I was eating a meal with a friend, and he was eating a hamburger, and he said, "This is the best hamburger I've ever had in my life." And I said, "Wait a minute. There's no way this is the best hamburger you've ever had." And he goes, "Well, it's really, really great, and I'm eating it right now."
And that's how you feel when you're listening to Rough and Rowdy
I
Ways.
mean, it's the one that I've
Yeah.
listened to the most
Wow.
in recent years. So of course it's my favorite. You know what I mean?
You've been a Dylan fan since the 80s,
1988. Yeah.
1988.
I don't need to listen to Highway 61 anymore. It's I've internalized it. Rough and rowdy is what I need to hear. But having said all that, what there is something about it that I think is really extraordinary, which is that it has a quality that I think is different than any album he's ever made. And I love Tempest as an album. Tempest is a challenging album in a lot of ways. It's dark, it's brutal, even sonically, I think it's harsh in some ways.
Mhm.
Rough and Rowdy Ways, I think, is kind of the doppelganger of Tempest in a
Mm.
lot of ways. The
Mm.
the one word I think, the one adjective I would use to sum up this album is comforting.
Mm.
And a lot of that has to do with just the tone of Dylan's voice.
Yeah.
The way it's recorded, the way he sings, it makes me feel comforted.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's a quality I don't really associate with any Dylan album.
I mean, just vocally, I don't like to do the like his voice is better or worse or whatever, but I will say, like, if we're just talking objectively and what makes a voice great and sound good, this is the best his voice is since Time Out of Mind. Like, it's rough on Love and Theft, better on Modern Times. And then
Right.
those next two, pretty rough, especially Tempest, Together Through Life, a little better. This is like a highlight for him vocally, this
Yeah,
album.
without a
It is
doubt.
a pleasure to listen to. And yes, it is comforting.
But I'm not just talking about the lack of gravel. It's
Yeah.
also just
The
sort of
way he's singing.
the way he
Yeah.
sings and what he's singing.
Yes.
It's like it sounds almost like he's trying to soothe your soul,
Mhm.
And I think Murder Most Foul is the best example of that.
Yeah, for such a dark
For such a
day in
dark
history,
song.
yeah, right? Like yeah.
He's singing about someone getting their head blown off,
Right.
and yet, you feel like everything's okay.
That's
And same thing with Key West,
Right.
which
Those are two more where like by the end of it, you're just like you like go in, you're like, oh boy, this is a long one. And by the end of it, you're just like, ah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I'm gonna die, but maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Right.
That's how I feel when I
And if
listen
Bob
to
Dylan's okay with that, then we can be okay with that.
Exactly.
Great. All right. Mike, where can folks find you? You've said it before, but why not say it again if they want to talk about Bob Dylan with you?
So on social media, I am White City Cinema,
Mhm.
Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky. That's where you can find me.
Yeah, come to Blue Sky. Talk about Bob Dylan.
Yeah, I keep trying to make Blue Sky a thing,
I know.
and my engagement there is never what it is
I
at
know.
Twitter, even still.
Yes,
So
I'm long gone from there, but I have you here in my home, so I don't need that app anymore. But great. Well, thank you, Mike. This was amazing.
always a pleasure. Can't wait to do it
We'll
again.
do it again. Yeah, next year.
That's right.
Let's go to my conversation with Adam.
Hey,
Welcome,
Henry.
welcome back to Songs of Experience headquarters. It's a little slightly different setup. Last time
Yeah, we've moved across the
we
table.
moved across the table.
It's
Yeah.
manifest destiny right there.
There you go. Yeah, July of 2024, we were sitting over there. We've moved all
Yeah,
the way over
eventually we'll
here.
be all the way at the window.
Yeah, next year for next year. So this is the 1 year anniversary of Songs of Experience. I
Whoa,
wanted to
I
have
didn't
you and
know that.
Michael back for our May 24th episode, the birthday episode. So, you and I have seen Bob Dylan so many times together
Right.
during that
Yeah.
period of time. Probably combined like 25
Somewhere in there.
times,
Yeah, it
and
must be.
maybe more, maybe a little
Yeah.
less. And we have more on the docket. We know you're going to see him in a few days. By the time
Yep.
this airs, you will have seen him. I will be at the birthday show. So, but I was saying to Michael, like it's sort of an odd thing to cover Black Rider as like the anniversary show. It's not like it's a seminal tentpole song in Bob Dylan's canon, but
Not yet.
not yet. There you go. Okay, but
He's playing all the hits tonight.
right. But it's definitely one that has sort of lived rent free in my head these past 5 years.
Yeah.
And certainly this last year, seeing it so many times and hearing all of the reactions with you sitting next to me to it, I
Mm.
think that would be one of the sort of oddly signature songs of the Rough and Rowdy Ways
Oh, for
tour,
sure.
especially this past year. So, what is it about Black Rider for you?
What I liked about it initially when the song came out is it just seems so different than everything else Dylan has ever done. It was that very spare arrangement. I think there's like four drum beats across the course of the entire song.
Yeah.
And the lyrics were fascinating. I wasn't sure who the Black Rider was supposed to be at the time, and I think there's many interpretations to that. But yeah, it was very compelling. It was kind of a dark goth sort of song,
Which goes back to your
which goes right
teenage
back
roots,
to my
right?
yeah, it goes back to my roots,
Yeah. So this is like it's like goth Dylan, right?
Yeah.
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 So
Is he the man in the long black coat? Is he the same guy?
right. Well, do you think there are connections to that?
I have no idea. It's
Obviously-
entirely possible.
Okay.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. I don't know if Bob was sitting down thinking, I'm going to write Man in the Long Black Coat Part 2 now.
Right.
But maybe he was, for all anyone knows.
I wonder. I mean, I hadn't thought about that before. I mean, this could be a follow-up to that.
One could see it that way, but
Yeah.
that's the major thing about Rough and Rowdy Ways songs is they contain multitudes.
Right.
There's a lot of different songs in each of these things.
What are some, all right, so what are some theories? I mean, I have you here for a reason. What are
All
some
right.
theories you have on Black Rider?
Well, first, let's go back to the 1930s. As I went
Bring it
looking
all
up
back up.
other songs called Black Rider,
Okay.
of course, there's the Tom Waits one that I knew very well. And there's also
That's not from the
that
1930s.
is not from the 1930s.
Yeah.
That's 1990s. But there was a Bob Wills recording
Hmm.
of a song called Black Rider that opened up Black Rider, Black Rider. Well, it opens up with the Misterioso Pizzicato. Dun, 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 dun,
Really?
dun, dun, dun. Yeah, which I had to look that one up. It's from a 1914 sheet music book for people playing along with silent films.
And it's by whom?
It's a remix book. I think there's a name of a composer in there.
You're talking about the
Yeah,
dun dun dun. Right.
which by 1920 people were already calling a cliche.
Wow. And so who is this Black Rider by?
So, but
Right.
there's the Bob Wills one. It
Bob
opens
Wills,
with that, then it goes Black Rider, Black Rider, and then it's a song where they kind of bug the Black Rider to do some writing. Like, if you don't do no writing, I'm gonna have to change your name.
Writing,
Because,
not writing.
it could be either way.
Yeah.
Yeah, like while the tired horses in the sun, how was I supposed to get any writing done?
Right.
But digging back a little further, there's also a version from about 2 years earlier, credited to Richard M. Jones, who is a piano player and singer here in Chicago. It was co-written with J. Mayo Williams. These
Okay.
were a couple of record producers, piano players, and jazzmen who have connections with everybody. Richard M. Jones is credited with writing Trouble in Mind.
Okay.
He recorded with Lonnie Johnson, who
Oh,
was the one
wow.
who taught Bob claims in Chronicles taught him the mathematical guitar thing.
Right, right.
J. Mayo Williams was one of the first to record Ma Rainey. He is credited with writing Karina Karina and all of these other little
A
things.
lot
But
of Bob Dylan connections
a
right
lot of
there.
Bob Dylan connections. If
Yeah.
you weirdly want to dig into it, Ronnie Johnson and Lonnie Johnson, Richard M. Jones and Lonnie Johnson played on a track together called Red Onion, which was then the name of Dave Van Ronge's trad jazz band that was one of the first to do a Dylan cover, if not the first, when they recorded If I Had to Do It All Over Again, I'd Do It All Over You.
Which we
And
saw in A Complete
yeah,
Unknown, a snippet
yeah.
of it.
And the lyrics to their Black Rider are slightly different than what Bob Wills used. There was this whole thing like Black Rider, I'll buy you a diamond ring, but if you don't do no riding, I ain't gonna buy you a doggone thing. And that verse is not in the Bob Wills version. The Bob Wills version does include a verse about Black Rider, keep your stroke, don't get confused,
Hmm.
which I think ties into the size of your cock will get you nowhere.
Right, right. Well,
And
what's the time? Less than 5 minutes? We already got to that
of
line.
course, of
Yeah.
course. And of course, Bob Wills wrote Ida Red, which was
Uh-huh.
the template for Maybelline by Chuck
Right,
Berry.
which,
There's
yeah,
the Dylan quote, there's Chuck Berry and there's everyone
right.
else. And you go listening to the Chess Records stuff.
With the Ida Red,
Yeah,
Ida Red.
Ida Red, I'm plumb fool about Ida Red. I mean, that same opening riff, the same basic rhythm. You listen to like the Chess Records stuff, and I love that stuff. But then you put on Maybelline, and it's just night and day. There's just so many steps beyond. And Ida Red itself borrowed all of its verses from an old Chicago parlor song
Mm.
called "The Parlor Is a Pleasant Place on Sunday Nights,"
And
and
is
it's a
that
parlor song about parlors. It's
that's
kind of
like
like how
so
half of
meta.
the ska songs are about ska. A lot of early rock songs are about rocking and rolling.
Right. Well, tell us as a Chicago historian, Adam, tell us a little bit about Chicago parlors, like what that is.
It was a parlor. It was your living room, as they called it
Mhm.
at the time, the
Mhm.
drawing room. There was a whole genre of parlor songs, some of which were kind of naughty songs that you sang in the parlor. The
The kind of
parlor is a
thing
pleasant
you would
place.
place to
Yeah,
hang
the
out.
place you would sit to hang out. And
Uh-huh.
there's this one, the parlor is a pleasant place to sit on Sunday night. It was written by the son of the guy who wrote the Battle Cry of Freedom.
Hmm.
So parlor songs like there's a whole scene in Chicago like Henry Clay Work who wrote My Grandfather's Clock,
Hmm.
and Come Home Dear Father, one of the most morbid songs about a little kid dying. That Victorians love that stuff. So
Right.
so yeah, we can dig around and see all these connections.
Hmm.
That I imagine Bob having such encyclopedic knowledge of early jazz and blues. He's probably heard Black Rider, either by Bob Wills, hence the stroke line,
Right.
or even like the version credited to Richard M. Jones, or sometimes Lee Collins, who played trumpet on it. It's a good groove of a song. It's fun
Mhm.
to listen to. But the only real connection, for one thing, is the other one opens with Black Rider, and many of the verses open with Black Rider, Black Rider. And similarly to Dylan's, it's completely ambiguous who the hell they are talking to,
Mhm.
or who this Black Rider is, or what this Black Rider is supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
Completely ambiguous. That in the early version, they're saying, "I'm going to buy you a diamond ring." In the Bob Wills, they mentioned that you're 3 times 7, you're 21, you ought to know what to do. And in both versions, if you don't do any writing, I'm going to have to change your name. So
Nice to hear an old song where someone is singing about someone appropriately aged.
yeah, what, the person's not 17?
Right. Or younger. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
but it wasn't until I got to the diamond ring line that it ever occurred to me the Black Rider might be a woman.
Mm.
Which it could be. It could be even in Dylan's song for all we know. Just because you just go home to your wife doesn't mean that,
Right.
But my interpretation of it, the one that I landed on, and the one that I always think of when I'm hearing Dylan play the song, is I think that the Black Rider is Dylan himself,
Okay.
and the speaker in the song is Death.
As opposed to Dylan as the narrator speaking to Black Rider.
Right.
This case, Dylan is not the narrator. It's something else.
Death
It's
is the
death
narrator
talking about.
talking to Bob Dylan,
Okay, say more.
taunting him,
Mm,
being exasperated by him,
hmm
and warning him that he's been on the job too long, and telling him the size of his cock will get him nowhere. Which, if Dylan wrote that line as death talking to him, is a weird kind of way of bragging. But
Yeah,
folks ain't got no use for bragging, Bob.
quite a flex there,
Yeah.
Bob. Yeah, yeah.
That's my interpretation, but it's by no means the only interpretation. It may or may not have been what Dylan had in mind. I'd be shocked if he ever said that that was the case. It also works the other way around. It could be Bob Dylan mocking death
hmm
throughout the song.
hmm
These things contain multitudes, but
Right.
the interpretation I always go with is that one.
Let's dig into that a little bit,
Sure.
Adam. So if it's Death talking to Bob Dylan as the Black Rider, Death is certainly a subject that Bob Dylan is no stranger to.
Right.
You know,
It's all over
obviously
Rough and Rowdy Ways, of course.
all over Rough and
It's
Rowdy
on the wall.
Ways. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. I mean, the Black Rider could be that skeleton image that I'm looking for a Rough and Rowdy Ways image
Yeah.
here, but you know what I mean.
The Grim
The
Reaper,
Grim Reaper with the
or
syringe.
one of those four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Right.
I only know him from the Metallica song, honestly.
And really, I mean, 97 and on, Bob has sort of been obsessed with mortality, I would say.
He's been singing "See That My Grave Is Kept Clean"
That's
on
true.
his first album.
Right, right.
Incidentally, Mayo Johnson recorded "Blind Lemon Jefferson."
hmm so yeah, I mean, Bob's been obsessed with death a long time, much longer
Mayo
than that.
Williams. I keep saying I keep both of these guys have such common last names. I was just reading up on them. I'm kind of bouncing between which last names are correct now.
Well, the first Black Rider you brought up was by another guy named Bob.
Another Bob, yeah.
What is there other? I guess my point is there are there other lyrical elements from that you would say point to specifically this being about death? I mean, obviously, the Black Rider
Right.
dressed in black, but if Death
Sure.
is singing, I mean, I guess you could say maybe that he's at his own funeral, or Death is
Or death is following him along
right
as he rides.
as he rides. Yeah.
That's how I think. One of these days I'll forget to be kind.
Mm.
He's knocked on heaven's door so many times before. But eventually he's gonna have to get caught. Now there are a couple of lines here that don't fit with it. My soul is distressed, my mind is at war. That's not something the death would normally say.
hmm
Nor
hmm
not normally,
hmm
anyway.
hmm
But
hmm
such vivid lines here. The road that you're on, same road you know, but it's not the same as it was only a minute ago.
mm mm
And it works into, of course, different interpretations. And be reasonable, mister, be honest, be fair. Bob has seen the great world and he's seen the small.
hmm hmm
Fell into the fire and you're eating the flame. Better seal up your lips. Now, there's one interpretation I read, somebody posted on Reddit or something. They thought it was Bob singing to his own younger self.
hmm
And that probably works too.
hmm hmm
However, it works many ways. There's also been it hasn't you don't really think of it as a song that's gone through a whole lot of different arrangements, certainly not on the level of like my own version of You.
Right.
But going through and listening to them this afternoon, there are like versions like in Japan, it was the electric guitar was turned way up
hmm
and the drums were a lot heavier than some other versions. At that point, I remember that when it was first, the recordings were first going around, I thought it sounded like a Doors song or something. And it would make a great Doors song.
Yeah.
And this was almost like Bob being up there doing those endless poetry excursions that Morrison would do over the Vamps.
Right, and then like even with like the reverb and the echo, that would kind of work.
And now and then it kind of comes and goes. They'll have all that reverb, the back rider.
Yeah, we saw it together 4 shows in a row, and it wasn't he didn't do the let go every night.
No,
and
there are some from Fall 23, one of the Chicago's in Grand Rapids, where there's a lot more than usual. Probably more than that too. I didn't like going through with it and with a scorecard.
Having seen it now, I mean, do you happen to know offhand how many Rough and Rowdy Ways shows you've seen total over the last since 2021?
About in the range of 25, 30.
So you've seen Black Rider 25 to 30
25
times
or
because
30
he's played
times,
it at
yeah.
every single Rough and Rowdy Way show,
Yep, including the premiere
including the premiere we were
in
at in
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee,
Yeah,
right? Before we knew each
wait,
other.
and I did listen to that version, and man, the cheers when he sings the line.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I never thought he'd actually sing that
I
line.
did.
Honestly, when the tour was first announced, I didn't think he'd ever do Black Rider live. I
Really?
thought
Say more. Why?
it was just so sparse, so quiet. I didn't really think he'd do one that slow off of the
Wow.
album. It just seemed very different. Looking back now at the piano songs from 2018, 2019, you could see him heading towards this.
Right, right.
But yeah, when he actually did it live, if I had been making bets, they almost famously now, Mike asked in the car to Milwaukee how many new songs we thought we were going to get, and Ray and I both said three at the same time. And I
Wow.
was gonna guess like the up-tempo blues numbers.
So you didn't think that despite it being the Rough and Rowdy Ways tour, you were going to get the whole album pretty much?
I didn't dare to hope.
I don't even remember what I thought at the
I
time,
mean,
but yeah.
he hadn't done a show with that many songs off of the new album since like the gospel tours,
Right,
really.
right, right.
So there hadn't been 8 live premieres in one night since a little bit before I was born, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. What has, having seen it so many times, Black Rider specifically,
Mhm.
has your opinion on it, this theory you have, has it shifted one way or the other? Has it changed? Has it strengthened? Did you have you kind of always had this theory?
I've kind of always had this. That's always the way that I approach it, and it's not a song like usually the next song, my own version of you. I feel like that tells a different story a lot of
Mhm. Do
times,
you think they talk
and
to each other at all, those two songs?
a little bit, yeah, a little bit. Not as I don't notice too many connections between it, like I do sometimes with between my own version of you and To Be Alone with You. Now that those two go back to back,
Hmm.
and it was in London. It suddenly occurred to me like the person he's singing in To Be Alone with You might be the creature that he just
That he
created.
created, right?
And
Yeah.
there was a night this past run in the spring where I felt like To Be Alone with You was about whoever he was creating his own version of instead.
Right,
Whoever was going to
right,
have to disappear so he could
right.
be with the creation instead. And that's something I've always done at Dylan shows is I perceive them as different narratives and different stories and different characters. And a lot of this is all in my own head, but that's part of the fun of it. We hear
Yeah.
what we hear in these things. I don't expect that everybody else that one night in 2001 thought of Like a Rolling Stone as being like the angels and wings of desire who know everything about you except what it feels like to be you.
Mm.
But one night it sounded like that to me. And then there was a period where I didn't get stuff like that,
Hmm.
where he seemed to be more focused on the rhythm than on what he was singing.
I want to come back to that in a second, but I was just what you said about pairing up the songs on the drive home from Purdue, from West Lafayette. Mike and I, it sort of both occurred to us during the show. I think maybe it did for you too,
Yeah.
those pairings, and eventually this theory sort of fell apart in the set list. But
Yeah.
there was It's All Over Now, Baby Blue with I've Made Up My Mind to Give Myself to You.
Yeah.
The sort of It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, the ultimate FU to the audience, like that
Right.
last scene in A Complete Unknown,
Yeah.
basically, paired with this complete giving over of oneself to the audience that has, been a
Right.
part of his life or something. And
And
other things like that.
and previously for a long time I went and gotta serve somebody, then I made up my mind.
Yes,
So
yes, yes. I mean, those are more in many ways connected, maybe
yeah.
than polar opposites. The way It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, but would you would what would be a good pairing for Black Rider on the set list there?
Oh, Man in the Long Black Coat.
If that was yeah, that would
Yeah,
be
I would
good.
love it if those two came up
That would
back
be
to
good. I mean,
back.
Man in a Long Black Coat would really be perfect on
Or
this set.
Senor too.
Hmm.
Man
Hmm.
of the Long Black. Oh yeah, Black Rider and Senor would be interesting together.
Senior with all of those, as I talked with Jessica on our last episode, with all those Western motifs and
Yeah,
elements, those sort of cowboy things. I mean, the Black Rider,
fits right in. Yeah,
he's a
it's a cowboy image for sure.
it's the villain in a cowboy film,
Right.
essentially.
Usually,
Usually the good guy cowboy
yeah,
who dressed in white,
the guy
bad
with the
guy.
black hat on.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's usually the giveaway. So This is one that I would say that the changes in it over the last 4 years have been subtle, but there's something about it when you hear it live where it just takes your breath away. I mean,
Yeah.
you can hear on the tape as I was joking with Mike the other day that or when we were speaking that somehow magically there's a tape of you and I and Michael, and we're all reacting
Yeah.
to things. I don't know where it came from, but
Yeah,
but
huh.
just that there's sort of these audible gasps and laughs and just reactions to this song in particular. What
Hmm.
is it about this song in the set list for you? Like, do you think this is a key moment in the set list? Do you think this is important to Bob, this song?
I think they're all important to Bob.
Mhm.
And well, for me personally, when I get a new recording of a show, usually I skip right to Black Rider. I
Really?
usually skip right to Black Rider, my own version of you.
You're kidding.
That's always that's where I feel like the heart of it really started.
I mean, it's right there in the middle of the set list, right?
Yeah,
It's like Trek 7 or something,
right. And
right?
also, they're just a couple of my favorites out of it. So I
Wow.
don't want to say that there's any grand strategy that I have by listening to those
Yeah.
two first, but they're
You're
two
drawn to them in
particular
some
ones that I
way?
always, that those goth themes to it,
Yeah. Yeah. You're sort of, I mean,
Yeah,
you're
you're talking
somewhat.
to a guy who wore a cape to the 11th tour
I mean, for a living, you spend time in
in cemeteries.
cemeteries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm sort of blown away by that for a minute. I
Yeah,
gotta like,
those are always the first two I want to listen to.
interesting. That's funny. When I listen to the tapes from the shows, I usually start out from the beginning because I want to
Mhm.
hear how it all comes together. And then at a certain point, yeah, I do kind of jump, like I'll skip over maybe to be alone with you or
Right.
something. Although not so much after this most recent tour. That's
Mm.
that song has kind of won me back. When Bob ends this with "You've been on the job too long," I'm kind of jumping around a little bit,
Sure.
but
Dave Van
um,
Ronk.
yeah. So will you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, well,
So we know Dave Van Ronk
of
is one
course,
of.
it's Dave Van Ronk's version of Duncan and Brady that he
Mhm.
was covering a lot around 2002 with Been on the Job Too
Too long.
Long.
And Bob, of course, it's on Telltale Signs,
Yeah.
right? So you think that's a direct reference to Duncan and Brady
In the same way that Some Enchanted Evening
is Some
is
Enchanted Evening.
clearly a reference to
Yeah.
Some Enchanted Evening.
Yeah.
The line, "I'll take out a sword and hack off your arm,"
Yeah.
bringing that to the Black Rider, it's hard not to think of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. You know?
Just a flesh wound.
Yeah, I mean, that guy's all dressed in black and then
Right.
gets his arm hacked off.
Right, right, right. That's amazing. I'm sure Bob has seen that movie
Of
and loves
course.
that movie. In your premise of Death talking to Bob Dylan as the Black Rider saying you've been on the job too long,
Yeah.
is the commentary is Bob
That's
making
kind of an ominous warning there. This is a guy who's already outlived his life by far
Mhm.
and may need a reminder.
Is Bob sort of poking fun at those who critique his last 40 years of work or 30 years, or is
I
he
think
like is he
always.
sarcastically saying you've been on the job too long? Like, is it
No, I think that's more
the
of. I think that one's more in this version of events, in this version of
Mhm,
of an interpretation. That's
mhm.
like more of an ominous warning,
Okay.
just a
Don't
remind, just a
don't
reminder.
overstay your welcome.
Yeah, just a reminder that you've already outlived your life by far. So some enchanted evening, I will sing you a song.
Is Bob warning us like this is
He could
I'm not
all.
gonna overstay my welcome, like I'm
Who
yeah,
knows?
yeah.
He'll stay as long as he can, I'm
Right,
sure.
right. How have you interpreted the different versions of it over the last 4 years?
Um,
Like how has it changed for you?
Lyrically, it hasn't changed very
Obviously,
much.
yeah.
It's more in terms of atmosphere.
Hmm.
And there's the version this past the most recent versions were heavy on the acoustic guitar.
Hmm.
There were some with an awful lot more drums than there were on the record.
Right, right,
It was really kind of thumping for a while with Jim Keltner on the drums.
right, right. Which is sort of his way. That's
Yeah,
his style. Yeah.
yeah.
But Anton Fig, I mean, he really added a lot of atmosphere
There
to it.
was a little more atmosphere and a lot more acoustic guitar
Hmm.
was apparent. I think I want to say you could hear a lot of the acoustic with Keltner as well.
And Bob isn't even really playing piano on the album,
No,
right?
but no, but sometimes he'll come up with like almost like riffs along the lines of do 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 do.
Mm-hmm.
Not that exact pizzicato,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
that kind of spookiness,
Hmm.
that kind of genre of stereotypically spooky piano.
It's it's the band there when he's playing it. It's almost like they're working so hard on what they're not playing, and in many ways
Yeah,
that's I mean just the holding back, that's got to be so challenging for them.
it's gotta be. Yeah, there's a lot of it. You gotta listen to the notes they're not playing.
Right, right. And that's really been like sort of the name of the game with the Rough
Yeah,
and
it's
Rowdy
like
Ways tour.
they can play, but they're not playing.
Anything else you want to say about Black Rider, Adam?
I really like this song.
Yeah, clearly, clearly. Yeah, well, this is, as I mentioned earlier, we're doing something a little differently for this anniversary episode, and we'll have you and Michael come back. I have some thoughts about Black Rider that I want your take and
Okay.
Michael's take on them, so we'll come back to talk about that. But thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Yeah, I will be stunned if he does Black Rider
That
on
would
Outlaw
that be
Show. I think it would
crazy?
be awesome.
That would
I
be
mean,
amazing.
plenty of things that he did on the Outlaw Tour were made absolutely no sense for a summer stadium show.
Any Rough and Rowdy Ways songs?
I'll be your baby tonight.
And-
Maybe he'll swap that out with To Be Alone with You or
Okay.
something. But my that's where I think the smart money is.
Do you think, and maybe this will be irrelevant because by the time this airs, you'll already know, but do you think he'll focus on another different album, like as like the,
That'd be great if
like if it was
four
Together
four
Through Life
songs
or
from
something?
Street Legal.
Oh, well, yeah,
Oh,
obviously. Yeah.
boy, would I love that.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Great. Well,
That
Adam, where can folks find you if they want to talk about?
AdamChicago.com.
That's
Come see me on a cemetery tour this year or something.
awesome. Awesome. Thank you
All
so
right.
much, Adam.
Thanks, Henry.
Thank you to both of my guests, Michael and Adam. We're now going to go to a little roundtable discussion. I'm going to share, maybe it's a hot take, maybe it's a medium take, maybe it's just a take on what I think Black Rider is all about. Hello, guys. Welcome back to Songs of Experience. So this is our roundtable discussion of Black Rider. I've sequestered each of you individually. Mike, we talked about the music. Adam, we talked about your theory on the Black Rider, who it is, and unpacked some of the lyrics. Usually I'm the play-by-play man, and I'm sharing stats and things like that. But I'm going to do a little color commentary tonight, and I want to share what I think the Black Rider is about and get your take on it. It's something we've talked about in the car before. I don't think it's a hot take. People have talked about it online and such, but I think that my thesis is that Black Rider is a veiled portrait of Donald Trump that Bob Dylan wrote during Trump's presidency and during all that crazy stuff that happened during his first term, leading and into the pandemic. Remember, this came out in June of 2020, right? So we were all sitting on Twitter, nowhere else to go when this came out. So I think that the song captures his persona and his impact through apocalyptic biblical imagery. So, like I said, released in June 2020, the peak of COVID-19. There were mass protests everywhere, right? Political instability. Every day we're like, oh God, what did this guy say? I know that all seems like, because of now, it's like so much more crazy with him that like back then it was like, oh, he was.
Around about 2018 is when we started seeing all these assassination references in the show. Like there was all these Julius Caesar references, and then Lenny Bruce, who was portrayed as an assassination victim. I go over this a lot.
Yeah, we talked about
already
this.
covered
We
this.
talked about
Yeah.
this. So let me just tell you a few things. All right. So Dylan's use of archetype over specificity allows Black Rider to stand in for Trump and for broader forces of chaos. And I think some of that plays into some of the stuff you guys were talking about. So who is the Black Rider?
Perfectly reasonable explanation, I think.
Thank you. A mysterious, sinister figure dressed in black, threatening, self-destructive, things that it possibly could be: a figure of temptation or death, a symbol of political decay, a personification of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which we know Bob is interested in all the Bibles. I don't call it the Old Testament because it's still there. It's the Tanakh, the Torah, and the New Testament, right? And Trump is sort of a composite of these interpretations. So I want to point out some key lyrics that when I was listening to this in 2020, I mean, this came to me back then. I remember talking a little bit about with Laura on Twitter, and maybe even you guys, as we were getting to know each other on Twitter. And I think Laura might have even mentioned it on either on a Zoom or on Definitely Dylan at some point. But all right, so here are a few phrases that to me just felt like Trump. They were, as the kids say, they were giving Trump, right?
Yeah.
All right. So Black Rider, you've been living too hard, been up all night, have to stay on your guard. Trump's presidency was marked by constant media blitzes, late night tweeting, if you remember, and combativeness with everyone. The been up all night, staying on your guard, it suggests his paranoia, defensiveness, and unsustainable intensity, right? He was always at 100. And remember, anyone that said anything about him was an immediate enemy. So just that complete combativeness. The path that you're walking, too narrow a walk, every step of the way, another stumbling block. This reflects Trump's approach to governance or lack of governance. This narrow path, legal edge walking, going back to the 80s, using Roy Cohn to do legal stuff for him to get out of things, ethical lapses. I mean, completely lack of ethics in any way.
Yeah.
And this created endless obstacles and crises for not just himself, but for the country. And it also implied an inevitability of downfall through self-created chaos. Like he was the one tweeting, he was the one making these decisions, he was the one making these executive orders. And I know this is all like we could be talking about literally him today in this moment. I'm really trying to stay in the past.
Yeah, to give it in the
because
context of what it felt like.
We'll be here all night.
Yeah.
The road that you're on, same road that you know, just not the same as it was a minute ago. I felt like this evoked Trump's nostalgia for like this lost version of America, make America great again, right? But we all know that that nostalgia was basically a longing for sexism and racism.
For Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah, but like it's the Leave It to Beaver that like doesn't include people of color.
Right.
And
well,
it's, like,
I've maybe seen one episode of Leave It to Beaver ever, but my memory is it's a very white show.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like that's what really make America great again is like really like like, and we're seeing that now with all the like the whole campaign was on anti-wokeness, anti-trans, right? It's like anyone who's we didn't see people who are other back when America was great. So like, that's the road he knows. That's the road he's on, and that's the road that he knows. And it's changed. It's not the same as it was a minute ago, but he didn't see it that way. You fell into the fire and you're eating the flame. Self-destructive behavior, embracing scandal, controversy, inflammatory rhetoric, a metaphor for both personal corruption and public recklessness. I mean, how many times did we say in those 4 years, and we're saying now, well, it's a dumpster fire, but when you see someone, when you'd see someone a couple weeks after the election, it was like, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good. The world's on fire, but I'm okay.
This is fine.
Right. The this is fine meme, right? Like that's the world we're living in. Be reasonable, mister. Be honest. Be fair. Let all of your earthly thoughts be a prayer. This was one of the lines that I remember listening to it in 2020, and really this was like, oh, he is pleading to the president to just be reasonable. Remember how like we just wanted him to just not tweet or not say something crazy or not be racist or anti-Semitic or it would have been so easy to just be reason. All right, I'm going to stop here for a minute.
Okay.
I've got more. What do you guys think so far?
I think that sounds valid.
Okay.
It all sounds valid, Henry. If you want to go through the whole thing, let's do it.
I've got a couple more.
Okay.
Go home to your wife. Stop visiting mine. This again was like all of the what was the name of that porn star?
Stormy
Daniels.
Yeah.
Like all of the infidelity and the scandals and the rapes.
Bob could be married to Stormy Daniels for all we know.
I mean, this is just to me it was just an allusion to his history of those extramarital affairs, accusations of he was convicted of this stuff. Like that idea of like, I remember that line being so vivid to me, go home to your wife. Like that was one of those rebuke lines. To me, that wasn't just a reference to his infidelity and like that, but that he infiltrated all of our lives and wives. Like he's in, he would constantly be in my wife's phone, like at night.
Yeah.
Like those are, he like was in these intimate parts of our lives, like we're doom scrolling at night when we should be sleeping, like so that was sort of like more than just you're visiting my wife, you're visiting my family unit, you're a part of my life. Don't hug me, don't flatter me, don't turn on the charm. Saw this as like a direct rejection of Trump's manipulative charisma,
Yeah.
his sort of fake performative empathy and celebrity schmoozing. Like, remember in the 80s, like we all remember the 80s, right?
Yeah.
He's in Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. Like he was a frequent guest on Howard Stern, one of the best guests. He was hilarious. Like he was like a funny celebrity that you'd
Yeah,
see
I
on.
remember kids ripping on it when I was in third or fourth grade.
Right, he was
Like, he's not really as rich as he says he is. It
right.
was one of the times when he was going bankrupt and then reorganizing his debts or something.
Barbara Walters called him out on like 2020 for that very thing.
Yeah, the
And
9-year-olds
he's
of the world knew it.
right,
So,
right. I think Bob's saying like we're not falling for this bullshit.
yeah,
I'll take a sword and hack off your arm.
it's only a flesh wound.
Right, you thought that was a reference. It
I don't know if I
could
think
be a
it's
reference.
but it's
Yeah,
definitely what I think of.
this sort of dramatic violence, which is no stranger to Bob Dylan songs. We've seen this before.
Right.
It suggests the way he would just cut ties. Immediately that person was a loser, an enemy, people that he worked with for years. Hold it right there. Here we go. You ready? The size of your cock will get you nowhere. This was the excuse the expression, the climax for me of when I really thought this is about Trump. Remember that whole thing about the Story Daniels, the hand size,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
that was such, I mean, everything about Trump is dude in a midlife crisis sports car,
Yeah.
right? Like
Mhm.
everything, the it's going to be the most lavish, biggest building, Trump Tower, right? Like all of that stuff. It is just so everything about him is phallic
Yeah.
and
Overcompensating.
overcompensating. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'd like that line. We when we were talking about that to both of you. I mean, it was brought up so many times. Obviously, it's a key moment in the live show. I mean, hearing Bob Dylan say something that graphic was like it's shocking. It's a rare moment of like explicitness from Dylan, right? Like
Yeah.
we talked about that. But like Adam, you said that you didn't think he was actually going to do it. Was
Yeah,
actually
I
going to
didn't think
say
he was
it
actually going to
live.
have that one live. I thought that would be like the verse that he dropped.
Yeah, right. But like he really says it.
Yeah.
He enunciates COCK, and I think that also mirrors the way Trump just says disgusting things on live TV in front of people,
Mhm.
regardless of his stature and position.
Mhm.
And so I think that's Dylan sort of mocking Trump's bravado
Yeah.
and Trump's like not caring about what he says, and obviously the obsession with image and masculinity and hearkening back to when America was great, right? And mirrors that infamous moment in 2016 debate when he defended the size of his hands and
Yeah.
thus his manhood. And then lastly, Some Enchanted Evening. I'll sing you a song. You've been on the job too long. That's the button on the whole thing.
Mhm.
In 2020, it was enough already. We had all had enough. It was like whether you thought, whether your guy, and Michael, we talked about this offline, like whether your guy was Bernie or whomever, like Joe Biden, whomever, just this guy's been on the job too long. It needs to stop. And I mean, here we are 100 days in, and it's like, oh my God, we're back again, right? But the closing here felt like a farewell, sort of calm but damning, that Bob is saying, get out of here. You are not welcome here anymore. It's over. And it's a final verdict, both weary and conclusive. Like we were just so tired in 2020 of it. Like obviously there was both a rise to action and like let's vote this guy out of here, but also I feel like the country was just like tired of him by that point.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How am I doing with my case so far?
Doing all right.
You've argued it convincingly.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you accept my premise. I want to mention just briefly the four horsemen of the apocalypse because with Trump as all four. Because yeah, the white horse, conquest, false prophecy,
Yeah.
right? Some intertextuality there. Trump's messianic campaign style, like I can alone fix this, right?
Yeah.
Disinformation, the cult of personality, authoritarian ambition. Dylan's line, seal up your lips, loyalty over truth. The Red Horse War. I mean, now that's more evident than ever.
Mm.
But then it was the culture wars, right? And I think now it's
Sure.
the culture wars too, but racial strife, insurrectionist rhetoric. I mean, I think by the time January 6th had happened, the album had had the album already been out. I mean, yeah, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It came out in June 2020.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
right.
Gen
So
6 was 6 months later.
right. So governing through division and provocation, right? The Black Horse, famine. We literally lived through a pandemic that he made way worse than it would have been. There was a big old
Mhm.
binder on how to handle these types of situations, and that he threw in the
Always full of
garbage.
situations.
Food insecurity, right? Here we are again, freaking out over eggs and the rise, the cost of groceries. Remember during the pandemic, people hoarding materials and
Yeah.
going
Toilet paper, yeah.
toilet paper, all that stuff. And his failed pandemic response. That was its own version of famine. Um, and the literal connection is in Revelation, the Black Rider brings economic ruin. And and that was his economy, just like it is now. The Pale Horse, death. Over 1 million US
Yeah.
COVID deaths, obviously. Death as a consequence of his policy, not just as a disease. So, in conclusion, I think that Dylan is drawing archetypes. He's both pointing fingers and drawing archetypes, creating these sort of versions. And I think this song functions as like a mirror to the Trump era America.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Black Rider is a political song, even though we're living in a political world, in the traditional sense. And obviously, Bob hasn't written those kind of songs in a long time in that
Right.
traditional sense. But it's a moral vision. I think it's a warning. And, I think it's like a warning of like, if we let people like this, Black Rider, go unchecked, their egos run rampant, misinform people, charismatic destruction, this is what's going to happen. I mean, I think Bob here is in Black Rider is like the prophet Ezekiel or Isaiah standing on the mountaintop. I mean, those prophets were really yelling at the people
Yeah.
like, "You're sinning." I don't think Bob. I think Bob is pointing a finger at a specific sinner here. And now more than ever, I think this is why this song was so moving to me on this last run. We're back living through the same exact hell as we were the first time the Black Rider came around. And it's not like there's the angel of death has a kryptonite. You can't send the angel of death away forever, but he's come back again. That guy on the cover of Rough and Rowdy Ways with the syringe is back.
Yeah.
And I think that
on the poster, yeah.
on the poster, and right on the cover, right on the poster, things weren't always what they seem
Right.
4 years ago. And I think that that's why this song, it's maybe in the second tier of best songs on the album, or it's not necessarily even the greatest moment of the live show. There's something about it that has stuck with me for the last 5 years, and certainly this last month seeing it live again that has reinforced this theory that I've had for years. I rest my case. What do you think, Mike, about my premise?
I agree with you and I disagree with you.
Tell me why both.
I feel like, Dylan himself has said many times, including in the great Rome interview in 2001, he says, I write these songs as a stream of consciousness type thing. So I just don't think that he had Donald Trump in mind specifically. You know what I mean? And I don't think his songs have that are you can make a one-to-one comparison between what it is saying and then what it's really about. However, having said all that, you're right that Dylan always reflects the times. He's someone who's hyper aware of the era he's living in. So he's picking up on things that are in the air, including, I think, a lot of the rhetoric that you're talking about. I mean, we talked about the song it's a monologue where one person, the narrator, is criticizing the Black Rider, and kind of cutting him down to size. And I told you I thought it was Dylan talking to himself, talking to his shadow self.
Right.
But if I think about it in general terms of Dylan criticizing what he sees as worth criticizing, the kind of American hubris that I think Donald Trump represents, then I can go along with that. Because, it's also been pointed out that, Dylan's obsessed with ancient Rome, right? And he quotes Juvenal in the song Black Rider.
Right.
That's where the cock line comes from.
Right.
Juvenal was a poet who chronicled the fall of ancient Rome. And a lot of people, like Richard F. Thomas, thinks Dylan is doing the same thing for America.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying the American empire is reaching its end.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I think you are correct that Donald Trump does represent sort of the logical end point of America.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you guys. I mean, I don't want to end on such a bummer.
Greek note.
I know it's like sort of so rough and rowdy ways to
Let's
end
all
up
just say over and over.
right.
Again.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do. Here's what I'll say. Thank you for entertaining this. Something that is, it's just been bubbling inside of me for 5 years, and so thank you for listening and pointing those things out. And I do think it is sort of off the beaten path of how I do usually interpret Dylan, which is yes and it all could be true.
Yeah.
This one,
Yes,
for whatever reason,
roads. Yes, and
this one just particularly, I just couldn't get that, so I had to get it out of me. So thank you, being here on the 1-year anniversary of Songs of Experience.
Well,
and,
if you were my student and that was a paper, you would get an A+.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor. I appreciate that. Thank you. That's great. I mean, it's it's so we'll celebrate together on the road many more times. But thank you guys for being such great guests and such great friends.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening and watching. Look for the next episode on the 15th day of the month in all of your podcast feeds. You can give me a follow on Blue Sky at Henry Bernstein. If you're subscribing on Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to give us a rating and review. It's the best way to spread the word about the show. For a video version of this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube at Songs of Bob Dylan. You can email us at songsofbobdylan@gmail.com. Thank you to my friend and mentor, Rob Kelly, for designing our fabulous logo. To my mandolin teacher, Mark Mitchell, from the Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago. If you'd like to help support the cost of hosting my podcasts, go to patreon.com/gonzo3249. For $5, I'll show a little gratitude by giving you a shout out. So thank you to Rob Kelly, Roberta Rako, Matt Simonson, and Christopher Vani. For $10, I'll also send you a surprise piece of vintage Bob Dylan merch. So thank you to the girl from the North Country, Katie Surovic. Speaking of merch, I have a store. Lots of fun stickers and shirts and hats and other Bob Dylan goodies for you to check out. Go to etsy.com/Henry Podcast Store. Thank you to my Substack subscribers, Mark Godfrey, Linda Maltzby, and Peter White. Check that out at substack.com. Truly, I love you all. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.